Hello.
Hello.
Hello there. All right. So we're back again with yet another live session today. So we're going to be touching on a very interesting topic. All right. So I can see that a lot of people are joining right now. So thank you so much for being back on today's live. Right. And I guess you guys can see we have a new team member on board. So allow me to introduce her, Abby. I believe our audiences today would like to know you better.
Hi everyone. My name is AB. I'm the trainee counseling here, and I'll be actually completing my internship at PPC. So I look forward to more opportunities to speak with everyone.
All right. Yes, and for sure, today Abby and I are looking forward to discuss further on today's topic. And if you have taken a look at our title, it's like questioning you guys, right? Like, are you intelligent enough? Or it's more like, you think you're intelligent enough? So some of you might have felt challenged, but that's not the point of today's topic. Actually, we are not here to question anyone's intelligence. Let me just, preface by saying that. It's rather to actually emphasize that there is a particular type of intelligence that often gets overlooked. When it comes to intelligence, there's like different types actually, but the ones that we are most familiar with, the ones that we know the most, is often cognitive related. It's often intellectual related, it's cerebral. Let's put it that way. It's more cerebral. So what if we tell you that there is actually another kind of intelligence? And that's where the question comes in. Now, taking into consideration this another kind, which is emotional intelligence. Now, taking that into consideration, are we intelligent enough? Right? So again, we're not going to leave at you just questioning yourself and questioning your intelligence. No, of course not. We're going to be taking you through this topic on emotional intelligence and what exactly it is about, what it means, why it's important, and also on how to develop them. So yeah, there is hope actually. If you do feel like you may lack emotional intelligence, it is definitely something that we can learn to develop. So we will be taking you through this topic today to help you guys understand what this topic is about and also hopefully understand on how we can develop this together. Right. So anything you would like to add on, Abby?
No, everything's good. Mm-hmm.
All right. So yes, we will jump straight into today's topic without further ado. So let's just start with what emotional intelligence is about, right? So looking at the definition itself, Daniel Goleman, he defined it as a person's ability to understand, to recognize, to manage the feelings so that those feelings are expressed in an appropriate and in an effective manner, right? So if we dig further and look further into this definition, it tells us that having emotional intelligence means that we recognize our emotions and try to understand them, try to make sense of it, like why are we feeling this way? And also, it means that we are able to manage them as well. So it doesn't stop at just understanding and recognizing them, but it also about how we can manage them once we are feeling our emotions and express them appropriately, right? So yeah, this basically what emotional intelligence about. So looking at this definition is where under this umbrella of emotional intelligence there are four aspects, and there comes in self-awareness, right? So when we talk about emotional intelligence, there has to be self-awareness. And this is the recognizing part of the definition, right? Recognizing our emotions. So once we are aware of our emotions, that's where we understand them and learn to manage them. So the second part under emotional intelligence is self-management. So here's where we learn to regulate our emotions and how to manage them better, right? And another subtopic under emotional intelligence is where there is social awareness. So it doesn't stop at learning about your emotions and understanding your emotions. Now it's also about understanding other people's emotions, understanding what they are going through as well. And there comes in another main topic under emotional intelligence, which is relationship management. Now that we understand ourselves and understand the people around us, here's where we can use this emotional intelligence as a tool to help us manage relationships. And that involves various aspects, right? It could be in career, family, friendship, relationships. So yeah, that's why I think it pretty much tells us why emotional intelligence could be important. Don't you think, Abby?
Yeah, you know, And also, like, because just now it was just more of those like basic definition, maybe some people will still be wondering, like, why do I need emotional intelligence? So maybe we can look at it at another way. So I would actually like everyone to, imagine a place where like understanding and managing emotions take a back seat, where empathy and effective communication are lacking. So let us explore the consequences of like such a world, highlighting the importance of emotional intelligence in our lives. To start off, like in a world without emotional intelligence, misunderstandings would become a commonplace. Like without the ability to recognize and understand emotions, people would struggle to communicate effectively, leading to like misinterpretation, assumptions, and even conflicts. So as a result, relationships become strained, divisions deepen, and collaboration becomes like challenging. And secondly, there will also be like a lack of empathy and understanding, because emotional intelligence enables us to empathize with others and actually understand their perspectives. Without it, compassion and understanding would go down the tubes. Like in such a world, people become disconnected, unable to like support and relate to one another. This absence of empathy can lead to like isolation, loneliness, and breakdown in social bonds. So, and moving on, emotional intelligence, like they guide us in making thoughtful decisions by considering like both rationality and emotions. So, in a world lacking emotional intelligence, impulsive decision making might take over. Without self awareness and emotional regulation, individuals can act on immediate emotions, like leading to poor judgments and regrettable choices that may have, long-term consequences. So, for example, a person with no emotional intelligence may just shout at other people for having a different perspective. It's like, my way is the best. Why can't you agree with me? Ignoring like others' opinions or even looking down at them. And what are the consequences of this? First, people may distance themselves from this person, refuse to work with them, and the worst, maybe they will just completely cut ties with this person. And last but not least, emotional intelligence plays a crucial role in maintaining mental well-being. So without it, individuals struggle to understand and manage their emotions effectively. This can lead to like a heightened stress, anxiety, and depression. So the absence of emotional intelligence actually amplifies like mental health challenges, affecting like one's overall quality of life. So just to sum up, like misunderstandings, conflicts, like a lack of empathy, impulsive decision making, and mental health challenges would become a norm in a world without emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So Nani, is there anything that you would like to add on?
Yeah, definitely looking at what you put it, and I think you put it really well on essentially what we will become or what the world will become without emotional intelligence. And that got me thinking, imagine a world where we don't understand not just ourselves but each other. That feels like an awful world, don't you think?
It will
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
disaster.
A disaster for sure, yes. Yeah, so that's exactly why emotional intelligence is important, right? And ultimately, life is designed in a way that, we have to be interdependent, right? Yes, we are individuals, but yeah, we are social beings at the end of the day, and we are interdependent. Inevitably, we are interdependent on one another. So living in a world where we don't have that emotional intelligence and where we don't really understand each other. And firstly, we don't understand ourselves. That's going to be also us like really invalidating ourselves and our experiences, really not trying to. I mean, I can only imagine how like it's like you don't understand what you're going through, and that just causes even more emotional turmoil. And that's exactly like how you pointed out. It becomes an issue with mental health as well, leads to, stress, anxiety, depression, and the list goes on, right? So that's why just understanding, it all starts with understanding, and that understanding comes with curiosity as well. Like, why is this? And rather than a place of judgment, it's more on like curiosity, why this is happening, why we are feeling what we are feeling. And that also, when you think about it, normalizes what we feel also. Because when we think about it, we are humans made of emotions. We are supposed to feel things. And imagine if when we feel something and we are like, why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way, and straight up invalidating ourselves. We are not allowing ourselves to feel, and that just defeats, or it goes against the nature of ourselves, which is to feel emotions, right? We
Yeah.
are made to feel them. And it's not fair that we constrain ourselves, like certain emotions are acceptable, these emotions are not acceptable, that kind of thing. That's that's where emotional intelligence normalizes that, feeling emotions is okay. But it's a whole different topic on how feeling emotions are okay. It's about what you do when you experience them.
Mm.
And this is where today's topic touches on. It doesn't stop at understanding and recognizing your emotions, but also in managing them. The management part is where it helps us prevent from certain emotions translating into behaviors that are unacceptable. So this is exactly why emotional intelligence is key. So I think without further ado, we can just jump straight into how we create that self-awareness, right? So as I put it earlier, emotional intelligence involves self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So I'll be touching on the first part, which is self-awareness. So how do we create self-awareness, right? And how do we understand ourselves better? So it starts with identification first. Identification of our own emotional states, where we are at emotionally. So this is pretty straightforward actually. It starts with naming your emotion, putting a label on that, like try to name it, right? So when we talk about emotions, what kind of emotions come to your mind? Like, the basic emotions. If you could name a few.
Angry.
Angry, yeah. Interesting that you pointed that out first. But yeah, that's anger. Yeah. Anything else? That's happiness. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Sadness.
Yeah. There's sadness, there's fear, there's disgust. So these are like the main ones that comes to our mind. But what if I tell you our emotions have layers to it, right? It doesn't just stop at just feeling angry, just feeling fearful. There's always layers to it. So that's where trying to label them helps. And I have something to share with you guys actually, and a tool that you can use. And this tool is called Emotion Wheel or Feeling Wheel. You can look it up, and I actually have here, but I'm not sure how clear it is for you guys to see. But this is how basically it looks like, right? So here it has all the basic emotions in the middle circle, right? It starts with those basic emotions. As we mentioned earlier, there's fear, there's anger, there's happiness and whatnot. But if you were to choose one, let's choose one, right? Let's choose with anger, like what Abby said. We'll go with the one
Okay.
anger over here, right? I know it's not clear, but I'm just gonna try to help you guys understand the gist of this tool right here to help us label and name our emotions. So once you look at the anger part here, it branches out to a whole bunch of other emotions, right? So I will name it for you. There's rage, there's exasperation, there's irritability, there's envy, there's disgust in that as well, right? And if you look further here, there's even more, right? It branches out to hostility, there's hate, there's agitation, there's frustration, there's annoyance, there's aggravation, there's resentfulness, there's jealousy, there's contempt, and there's feeling of revolted as well, right? So here's where you would realize if you branch out, it isn't just about anger. There's like deeper sense on like, and also it tells you the intensity of your anger also. Is it to a point of hating someone, or is it just annoyance, right? So this helps in clarifying that. It's not vague in the sense that it's just anger, but helps us to understand deeper as well the layers of emotions that we could be feeling. So here's where the tool is actually help us. It is helpful. It helps us to identify what exactly we are feeling in that moment, right? So that's the identification part, labeling your emotion. And sometimes say you don't have this tool. I'm I mean, when you have it saved in your phone, that's best. You know, it's always accessible. But say you don't have it, and how are we going to help ourselves to identify our emotions, right? And here's the thing, emotions shows up in our body. Yeah. So if you really pay close attention and you like make a quick scan through your body, you would be able to feel some kind of sensation, some kind of symptom in your body. For example, anger, and it can show in your heartbeat as well. Your heart rate increases when you're angry, right? Similarly, when you're fearful, also it helps, your heart rate increases. So that's where taking the next step, which is like trying to understand, okay, I'm feeling this heart rate, I'm feeling my heart rate increasing. So what is this? Let's try naming the emotion. And at least it helps you clarify with whether it's fear or it's anger, looking at your situation, right? So yeah, and that's where, you know, when you don't have access to this tool, just scanning your body would be helpful. So that's where you ask yourself, okay, what do I notice in my body right now? Where exactly do I feel it? So once you understand that, and that's where you ask yourself, so what exactly am I feeling? The what part is, you know, you would be naming that wheel. So we have a question here asking that where we can get the emotional wheel. You can simply Google it. Yes, someone just helped us answer as well. Yes, you can simply look it up. It's it's called emotion wheel, and you'll find multiple images, and you can just have one of them saved on your phone. Yeah, as simple as that. So yeah, as I
Can
said,
set
developing
it as
emotional
a
intelligence
wallpaper
is very
as
easy.
well. Oh, sorry.
That's even
I
better,
just want to
right?
say, yeah, can just set a wallpaper, and wherever you go, you can just have a look at it.
Yes. And that reminds you, okay, I'm emotionally intelligent because I have it saved on my wallpaper. I'm always aware. So yeah, definitely a good idea. Whatever that helps, you know, as long as it's something that's accessible and helps you to have that awareness more and more. And I think as you go, as this becomes like a practice, and once you start being a pro, you would no longer find the need to refer to this, and you would right away be able to name your emotions. And that's a sign of like increased emotion. So that would be a good job on your part, I would say. So yeah, here's how you can make it a practice and, you know, understand yourselves better. So once you have labeled them, and once you have noticed what's happening in your body, this is where our emotional literacy increases. So this is where you can call ourselves, I'm emotionally literate. I'm able to label my emotions, and I know what happen. I usually know what happens inside my body when I'm feeling it, right? So this is, you know, where we start developing our emotional intelligence, and also taking a step further in trying to understand the intensity of it, like on what percentage, or like for example on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of that emotion I'm feeling. That's where we try to understand ourselves better, right? So it doesn't stop when it comes to self-awareness. It doesn't stop at just identifying. It takes another step also to really understand ourselves, is by observing our thoughts. Because if you really think about it, our thoughts and emotions are interrelated. Sometimes the thoughts makes us feel a certain way, and it also helps us understand why we are feeling that way as well. So that's where observing our thoughts would be helpful. So it involves by asking ourselves, so what's going through my mind right now? How am I seeing this situation? What I think happened here. So it comes with I think part. Okay, so here's where I would like to clarify, right? Because this confusion happens way too frequently. So remember earlier I was talking about asking ourselves, what am I feeling right now? So the answer to that question would usually sound like, I'm feeling. It starts with I feel, or I'm feeling this, right? But we often make a mistake of like, I feel like she is judging me. Now, is that really a feeling?
That's just more of like, it's a thought framed by saying that, oh, it's a feeling.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. So generally, when you're trying to label your emotion, when you say I feel dash or I am feeling dash, it has to be accompanied by the words related to that emotion. So when you say I feel she, or I feel you did this, for example, that's the thought process part. So that's where observing your thought comes in. So that's where you phrase it as I think she is judging me, for example, or I think you were being mean to me, for example, right? But the understanding emotion parts is where like I feel embarrassed when you yelled at me, for example. So that's the difference actually. in the process of trying to understand our emotions. Yeah. So that's where, as you know, from the example that I gave earlier, the thoughts part help us to understand our emotion in the sense that when I said I feel this way when the thought process comes in, right? That's where it feels like, oh, that makes sense. I feel this way when this happened. This is why I'm feeling this. So this is the part that helps us with understanding our emotions actually. So observing our thoughts helps us with that. And here's the part, as I mentioned earlier, we would want to approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. You know, we can ask ourselves, what am I thinking right now? But if you were to ask yourself, like, what am I thinking right now? Why am I thinking in this way? Is this not a right way of thinking? That's the judgment part comes in, right? But if you ask with simply with curiosity, right? You know, you just ask yourself, what am I thinking actually right now? That comes with curiosity. That helps us to answer that question further and understand ourselves better. So
And
that's
sometimes,
basically, you were saying?
yeah, so and sometimes when we say that, like, why am I feeling this way, you felt as though like you are actually questioning or like judging yourself, you can always like phrase it in another way. So it could be like, what makes me feel like this?
Mm,
So this
yeah.
is actually more of like a curiosity that, like, oh, I wonder.
Mm, exactly. It facilitates our understanding further actually and deepens the understanding that we have for ourselves. So yeah, that's where we develop that self-awareness. And that's just one aspect of emotional intelligence. We have a few more to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we have a comment here saying that we can teach kids about emotions in more detail other than just anger, sad, and frustration. Absolutely. So yeah, this will, and it can be like a whole bunch of like really new words, but once we familiarize ourselves with them, it helps us also see that, oh my God, there's so many layers to our emotions. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how we develop our emotional intelligence. Yeah.
I also saw another questions that asked, does the wheel actually help with auto interpretation or is it just a guide? So actually, it's just a guide, but at the same time, it helps us to like equip ourselves with emotion vocabulary. Like it expand our
Yeah.
dictionaries to what we are actually feeling.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It definitely is a guide and it helps us to really see which of these words resonate the most with us, and that's how you know that's what you're feeling. Yeah. It helps us in clarifying that actually. Yeah. So thank you for your questions. So I suppose we can move on to the next part of
Yeah.
emotional intelligence. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So just now, like Nani already talked about how important it is to recognize and to identify our emotions. So apart from that, we also can learn about how we can learn to regulate our emotions, like especially in challenging situations. So when I talk about how we regulate these emotions, it can include like how we manage our anger, our frustration, stress, or like other strong emotions like effectively and healthily rather than being overwhelmed by them. So, but you may be wondering as well, like what are some of the unhealthy or like healthy emotion regulation practices? So for example, unhealthy emotion regulation practices includes like suppression. So when I say suppression, it's more of like, blocking out thoughts and emotional reactions. Like whenever they arise, we tell them, oh, you should go away. Which is exactly like what Nani mentioned as well. Like we would keep telling ourselves that like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. This is not how I should be doing. So this is actually an example of like suppressing. And
Yeah.
for another example of like the unhealthy practice could also include like avoidance. So this is like pretty straightforward. We basically just like ignore or like avoid difficult situations, places, or people. I'm gonna also include like my favorite metaphor here to have a better understanding of what exactly is avoidance. So imagine postman come to your house to deliver letters and then put the letters in the letter box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't go and collect and read those letters, they will just be piling up, and one day the whole letterbox will just be full and burst. And that's exactly what happens if we try to avoid like a situation or anything along all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah. And
It reminded me of this scene from Harry Potter, if you don't remember. I mean, sorry if you remember. Sorry, it's a very random thought, but yeah, it reminded me of the scene that, you know, the whole bunch of letters just start flooding in from that, you know, fireplace. Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly what happens with our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You experience that kind of flooding of emotions, and yeah, can't
Mm.
help that Potterhead in me to come up with that analogy, but yeah, that's basically how it goes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Okay, no worries. So you know, it's like we think avoiding like a difficult situation will actually help us, but in this case, it cannot do the opposite.
Yeah.
Like we were flooded with these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also like for the last one, it also includes like rumination. And what I mean by rumination is us trying to like repetitively focusing on like the causes and consequences of the problem, that we try to focus only on the past, like without actually actively seeking or moving into like problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is something that, how do I put it? So this is something like, you know, we can't help but to keep thinking that, you know, why would I feel this way? But
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it wouldn't change anything until you really do something. But then again, I'm not saying that like all these practices are something that, you know, we should avoid at all costs, because they actually do help us. Like in extremely difficult or like overwhelming situations, that it helps us to cope a bit better with it. But in the long run, they must not be like our all-time go-to practices. So on the other hand, there are like some healthy emotion regulation practices that we could try to practice, which include like problem solving. So problem solving is just us trying to like find out concrete ways of like resolving issues. We try to change like a stressful situation or manage the consequences. So we try to focus on the present, which also leads to like another practices like acceptance. We can try to accept the things that are actually not within our control, things that we can't change, and try to focus on things that we can change instead, which is like within our control. So examples of things that are within our control is, you know, our own actions, our own boundaries, the goals that we set for ourselves, and how I would like to spend my free time. So this is all something that we can control. And things that we cannot control would be something like, you know, in the past. It already happened in the past. What can you do, you know, in the present time to change that past? Also like the action of others and what other things of you. These are all something that we cannot change.
Yep.
And the last healthy emotion regulation practice will also include like reframing our thoughts. And when I say like reframing, it actually helps us to look at an alternative perspective. Like, you know, when we change our perception, it also influences our emotions. And from there, it will also influence like our behaviors. Like it helps us determine like what I would want to do with this situation instead. Like an example of this would be, okay, so you are stuck in a jam and feeling very frustrated. You may be thinking that, you know, I can't believe that this traffic is ruining my day. But
Yeah.
if you try to look at like an alternative perspective, you can actually say like, yes, I'm being stuck in a jam, but actually it gives me like an opportunity to listen to my favorite podcast and also some uninterrupted music. So, you know, when you see that, like you reframe the situation, you shift your focus from this frustration to finding like a positive aspect of this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all for the self-management part. Is there anything you would like to add, Nani?
Yeah, for sure. I think before I add on, I also have like we have a few questions here.
Okay.
So that one of the question is, so is rumination not healthy? Would you like to address that question?
Mm, so like I mentioned earlier, we will group it under unhealthy because like if we keep thinking about the things that frustrate us, like let's just take the traffic
Mm,
example. So when you start driving, you have been thinking, oh my god, I'm stuck in this jam. What is happening? Why do I have to be here? And whatnot. We keep thinking about it, thinking about it. It will just affect our emotions and our thoughts, and it could really ruin our whole day. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So, which is why we actually put it under like unhealthy practice.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it's more of like, it's rather unhelpful as well,
Mm.
right? When we talk about rumination, because rumination often involves focusing on what have happened and how things could have been, more of like that regret side of things. So maybe there could be a positive side to rumination where it helps us to recognize that how we could do things differently in the future. Now that's when it can be productive. But rumination often goes down to a pathway where we spiral, right? It really pulls us into that rabbit hole, and that's where it becomes unhealthy. Not just unhealthy, but also unhelpful, right? Because you can't undo it. There's really nothing you can do about the past, and other than feeling that this is how things could have become, and it further causes that emotional turmoil in us, and just makes us spiral further and further and further, and that's where and like we put it earlier, right? Because these things that we put under the not so healthy way of coping, which is that involves rumination, avoidance, suppression. We put it as something that is not so healthy, but it's not something for us to avoid at all costs. We are not saying that because it's not realistic. We as human, we are bound to ruminate sometimes. It's completely normal that we ruminate sometimes. It's completely normal that we avoid certain things sometimes and suppress sometimes. Sometimes it's helpful to suppress and go head on with, okay, what I need to do first, and then feel your emotions later on.
Mm.
Sometimes it's helpful that way. So it's more about what's helpful in that situation. And when you find yourself being in this counterproductive state of like constant rumination, constant suppression, constant avoidance, once you find it being unhelpful, that's where we tell ourselves to snap out of it. We tell ourselves to, okay, let's come back to what is within our control right now, what we can
Mm.
do. And that's exactly where your example with the whole traffic situation is helpful. Like traffic, it's not in anyone's control. And the more you think about how it's not in your control, the more frustrating it is, right? But really, what can we do, right? So that's where shifting your focus on like, okay, what I can do right now is that with this free time, I can use this time to listen to a podcast or like a favorite music or favorite podcast and whatnot. So in a way, by listening to music, you would be elevating your mood, and by listening to podcasts, you could get something productive out of it. So this is how you can turn that reframing part would be helpful. And of course, to expect ourselves to do this all the time, it's not realistic also, right? Yes, it's okay again from time to time to feel that frustration. It's completely okay. It's about how much of that frustration you're feeling and what you do in that moment of frustration.
Mm.
So I think that leads to another question of like, is adult tantrum one of the signs of lacking emotional intelligence? I would say it's more of lacking the management side aspect of emotional intelligence. So yeah, this person could very well be aware of their emotions, but on in terms of how to manage them, maybe that's where they're lacking. So instead of like labeling overall as lacking emotional intelligence, I would say it's more of like lacking that management aspect of emotional intelligence.
Mm.
Let's put it that way. Yeah. So it's about knowing where exactly you lack and working more on that. Yeah. So that was my point to add on to what you have just said earlier. So with that, I think we can move on to the next aspect of emotional intelligence, which is social awareness. Now, here we go. It's about, and this, if you can really think about it, it's more of like, um, having this awareness of other people's emotions now. So as as you can see, self-awareness is about understanding and recognizing your own emotions. Awareness is more of like understanding and recognizing emotions of others. So this comes with a couple of skills. And if you really think about it, it's something that we have touched on in the previous life, which is on the topic of providing support and how to support someone in the most helpful way, right? So that's where we touched on, observing, listening, understanding empathetically, practicing empathy, practicing non-judgmental listening, and also most importantly, validating, right? And I'm going to highlight on the point of validation because here we have another question where someone asked about like, how do you know if you're taking things positively or you're just gaslighting yourself? That's an excellent point because that's where the validation part comes in. So I'm going to touch on that shortly, right? So yeah, basically on the social awareness part is about understanding the emotions of others and recognizing them. And yes, if the other person is not able to label their emotions because they could be lacking that self-awareness. So from our side, we can help in doing that, and that's the social awareness part of this actually. We can help by asking, and here's where your observation could come in also, where you can observe the reactions of them. There's like non-verbal cues, there's their body language as well, their facial expressions. So from there you can point that out. You can say like, I can see that you're frowning, you look really stressed right now, can you tell me what's happening? Or how are you feeling right now? So that's where the social awareness comes in. So we can't expect ourselves to be mind readers and make assumptions right away, but it doesn't mean that we can't ask questions, right? We can always ask questions from whatever you're seeing, and just from that observation that you're making, you can ask questions to clarify. And from that, they have the opportunity to understand their emotions as well. Or even if they don't understand it, you're also helping them to recognize that emotion. In that, you are also recognizing their emotion. Oh, I see. So this is what you're feeling. So that's how that would go, right? So in that social awareness aspect, as I mentioned earlier, this is again a recap of our previous live talk, which is on, it comes with listening non-judgmentally, although you may not be liking what you're listening to, right? But the point of emotional intelligence and having that social awareness to help ourselves improve relationships and connections with people is to um, foster that empathetic understanding. So how do you do that? First, by listening and without any judgments first, right? And trying our best to understand where they are coming from and really see that where they are coming from. And then there is validation as well. And validation comes with a combination of empathy, right? Once you empathize and see where they're coming from, although you may not necessarily feel the same if you were in their shoes, but it's more of like, oh, okay, I see that in this moment you were hurt and I can see why. That's the validation part comes in. And that by doing that, we are not gaslighting them for feeling a certain way. Okay, I think this is helpful when it's given with an example. So for example, a loved one is coming to you and saying that, they feel hurt about what we have said. And in that moment, we'll be like, oh, I didn't say anything hurtful. But it doesn't change the fact that they were hurt by whatever we had said, right? So that's where validation helps us acknowledging the hurt. It doesn't mean that you are admitting to the fact that you did something that you didn't do or you didn't mean to do. It simply means that you're just acknowledging the hurt, actually. You're just acknowledging that, oh, I can see that you are hurt, and I can see what I said might have hurt you, so I'm sorry about that, but here's what I actually mean. That also gives you the opportunity to clarify yourself, clarify your intention. But in doing that, you're not invalidating right away. You're not saying that you're being silly for feeling this way. I didn't actually mean that. That's the difference actually. So now to address one of the questions earlier about, when you're practicing this on yourself, for example, in a traffic light situation, how do you know if you are not gaslighting yourself? When you lack that validation, that self-validation, when you lack that, when you're pushing away your emotions, that's when you know you are actually gaslighting yourself. When you're telling yourself, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I should look at the brighter side of things, that is toxic positivity, right? That is where we are gaslighting ourselves, we are not allowing ourselves to feel it. The point of this whole thing is that allowing yourself to feel it, allowing yourself to acknowledge what you're feeling it, and like I said earlier, understanding it with curiosity rather than judgment. So that's the difference actually in, knowing that you're not gaslighting yourself, instead you are allowing yourself to feel it, but preventing and bringing in that management part of emotional intelligence before it translates into a behavior that's unacceptable, or like, bringing yourself into trouble. For example, you're feeling frustrated, but when feeling frustrated is completely okay, going on a road rage that's where it's not the okay part, right? It's the not okay part, right? So that's where the management comes in. Yeah, so here's how we differentiate it. So it's okay to feel what you're feeling, but it's about what you do when you're feeling them. That's where the management part comes in. That's where the management part is key, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that clarifies this whole thing. And we are having a few questions as well. So
Oh, before you address those
okay,
questions,
so
I would just like
yes.
to add on from the part where you say, we recognize like others' emotion doesn't mean that we
Mm-mm.
try to read their mind. So a clearer distinction would be like, if you're trying to read their mind, it would be like when you see someone is not talking, you immediately say that,
Mm-hmm.
oh my god, he must be feeling angry. He must be like feeling frustrated of what I did just now, or like stuff like that. This would be my reading.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are just pointing out the fact that from what you see, for example, you can ask them like, I noticed that you have been remaining like, quiet for quite a while. What is
Yeah.
happening? Yeah, so this is just exactly you telling the person what you observe of them, instead of putting your own interpretation or like your own assumption into this.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because we can easily make that assumption from, like, from the cues that we see. But yeah, making that point to clarify and making it and like an open-ended question to understand, rather than like, you inputting your interpretation by saying like, oh, I think you're frustrated at me because I see you frowning. That's the assumption part, right? So
Yeah.
that's where, yeah, it's not helpful. Yeah. So yes, to address one of these questions here, what if in this situation it's more of like you thinking about a traumatic event? That is completely understandable, and from time to time we do get reminded from of those really traumatic incidents. So first of all, I'm sorry to hear this, and yes, secondly, it's completely normal to be affected by certain incidences, and sometimes those emotions come up again, but then it doesn't mean that you're ruminating. So here's where, like I mentioned earlier, rumination is where you're hyper fixated on wanting to change what has happened, or like really wishing that you have to change, and to a point that it takes up most of your mental space and you're not able to function. That's where rumination can be really unhelpful, right? But being reminded of a situation and wishing that things could have been different, that's completely normal. That's human experience, and it's okay to feel upset all over again about an incident that has been very impactful for us in the past. So that's completely normal. But I'm glad to hear that your son is healthy now. So and yes, please don't beat yourself up if you find yourself feeling upset or sad all over again about that situation. It's completely normal. It's human experience. So in that moment, it's where you tap into your emotional intelligence, try to understand what you're feeling, validate yourself that what you're feeling is completely okay. It's okay to feel that, and just allow yourself to feel it. Yeah. So again, it goes back to, it's about what you do when you're feeling those emotions. So as long as it's not translated into an unhealthy behavior or an really unacceptable action, yeah, it's completely fine to feel your emotions. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I suppose with the remaining time, we can move on to the final part of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from what Nani mentioned just now, it actually overlaps like with what falls under relationship management. So that just show like how much social awareness and relationship management would go hand in hand together. And under relationship management, it's just us trying to learn how to build and maintain like a healthy and positive relationship with others, which involves like effectively managing interaction, resolving conflicts, and fostering collaboration and teamwork. So to do all this, we can learn to be more empathetic. So, try to pick up on emotions is critical, but at the same time, we can also try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes in order to truly understand like their point of view. And when I say that, you try to put yourself in someone else's shoe, is not asking you to assume that, like, for example, like maybe someone failed a test and you actually failed a test previously also. It doesn't mean that you have to assume that whatever that person is feeling is exactly how you felt last time. It's just to empathize with them, knowing that they may be feeling sad, they may be feeling angry with themselves. It's just to show that, oh, I have the similar experience. But that doesn't mean that I need to assume everyone go through the same thing. We have the same intensity of whatever that we're feeling. And just practice like empathizing with others. You can try to do this by, imagine how you would feel in a similar situation and what would you like to hear from other people if you are in this situation. And in addition to that, also try to include, like, to adjust like your responses based on what you know about the person. Like, for example, if you know that your friend is someone that prefer you to attend to their emotional needs and don't interrupt them when they are trying to share things with you, or like they are just venting about their days, like how they had a difficult days, then you can just be a good listener and be there for them, and you don't have to jump straight into conclusion and try to start giving them like advices or solution, or like, oh, you can actually do this, or like you should do this instead. And in this way, they may feel very like invalidated, like they are ignored. Like, I'm just here trying to seek like empathy or like understanding from you, and you're telling me what can I do next. So yeah. So like when you
Sorry,
you can continue.
go ahead.
So like, when we try to imagine scenarios like this, it helps us to build an emotional understanding of a specific situation and also to develop stronger emotional skills in the long term. Another example that I can think of would be helpful is also like when you see a younger child or like a younger sibling is throwing a tantrum. So maybe our immediate reaction or like emotions that we feel would be like angry or like frustration. Like, why are you throwing a tantrum? But actually we can think of it another way. So there must be a reason of people trying to throw a tantrum. You can try to like ask them, what is it? Like, what makes you trying to throw a tantrum? Like, is there anything bothering you? Would you like, to share with me and all? So this would be like an example of how you can try to manage your relationship and interaction with others.
Yeah, definitely. I can easily see how that turning into something more, what's the word? More fruitful, in the sense that it also deepens that connection between siblings instead of like turning into a sibling fight that could easily gone down that route, right? Like, seeing your younger sibling throwing a tantrum, you could easily make an assumption that they're just being a brat and, getting into a brawl with them, that's just messy. But yeah, that's just one example. But yeah, again, but instead looking at how clearly seeing that they're frustrated at something and you empathizing with them and trying to understand that, that's where, it deepens the bond between, a family member. And this is applicable in any other relationships as well. So again, this highlights the importance of emotional intelligence. It's not just helpful in us understanding ourselves and understanding our emotions and learning to manage them in a healthy way, but it also helps us to create that space for others to do the same. Actually, we help them to recognize their emotions, and we help them to manage it as well. There's this thing called co-regulation, where it is usually useful with younger people or those who really need assistance with managing themselves when the emotions are too overwhelming for them. And being emotionally intelligent is where you can co-regulate, in the sense that, okay, let's try deep breathing together to help them get into that management part as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, someone who is emotionally intelligent would understand that this is what they need in that moment, right? Or at least make that effort to understand what their emotional needs are. I think that's one of the main points that you highlighted earlier as well. in the process of trying to understand, it's also about understanding the emotional needs underneath. And this is applicable to ourselves as well. When we are trying to understand our emotions, we are also understanding what our emotional needs are, right? Our emotion always tells us something. If you really pay close attention, it tells us what you need. So asking
Mm-hmm.
ourselves those questions, what am I feeling right now? So once you've identified what you're feeling, asking yourself, what what do I need in this moment? What are my emotional needs? Or, for example, right, I'll give you an example of like an anger or like a frustration or sadness in the moment. It tells you that maybe some kind of emotional need was not met. So that's probably why you're feeling that way. And then that's where you ask yourself this question. So what was violated here? What was not met here? And that
Mm-hmm.
deepens our understanding of our emotions actually. And that's the curiosity part that I mentioned earlier on how we can have that kind of curiosity to understand ourselves better, right? So make it a goal to understand the emotional needs of ourselves as well as of others. And once we understand both, that's where we can have that conversation of like expressing our emotions and also understanding what the other person emotional needs are. And of course we can't put ourselves in a position of like constantly fulfilling other people's emotional needs, but at least we can have that conversation. Okay, how
Yeah.
we can have these needs fulfilled. Yeah. So this is why emotional intelligence facilitates that. It allows the space for us to connect, for us to understand each other, and apart from understanding ourselves, we are also creating a space for how we can coexist with our own emotional needs, but we need to coexist still. So how
Yeah.
we can find the middle ground. It
Mm-hmm.
allows for more such conversation and communication for that. So this is exactly why having this emotional intelligence is important. So, yeah, points to take away from today's live session would be understanding that emotional intelligence is really important, and it's important to not just manage ourselves, but also to manage relationships around us, and that can be any form of relationship, even in a work setting, right? It helps in resolving conflicts, it helps in coming up with solutions, it helps us to negotiate, it helps us to create win-win situations. That's what we want eventually, right?
Yeah.
We would want to win and we would want the other person to win as well. So here's how. So how we can do that is developing self-awareness, learning how to manage ourselves when we are experiencing those emotions, and firstly by normalizing that emotions are okay. It's okay to feel them. It's about what you do when you're feeling them, keeping
Mm-hmm.
in mind that before it translates into an unhelpful behavior, we need to bring our management skills in. We need to learn to manage our emotions. And aside from that, is also understanding the emotions of others, that social awareness, and then relationship management, how we can be the point of change. Actually, I don't think we talk about this enough about, how we can be the one to facilitate this kind of communication, that kind of open communication where, we bring more productive communication rather than conflicts. Like I mentioned earlier about in a whole sibling situation, it can easily turn into a
Mm-hmm.
conflict, but preventing that from happening, but instead making it something more fruitful, something deeper comes out of it, something beautiful could come out of it as well, right? So that's the whole point of having emotional intelligence eventually. And I think one last thing I would like to point out is that you know how I mentioned about being that point of change. And I think within our Asian culture, within families, we don't practice that enough. We don't practice that kind of like communication or like understanding of each other's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Instead we just like, yeah, make a lot of assumptions, or we tend to just like, older people are speaking, so we just, keep quiet, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't express ourselves enough. We don't provide each other that safe space to express ourselves, to feel our emotions, and a lot of emotional invalidation happens also. We don't validate ourselves enough. But here's how, with emotional intelligence, we can be that point of change to
Mm-hmm.
create more of this space, safe space within family first, and imagine from there it outgrows into the community, and together we can be a community that is empathetic, that is understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, a community that understands mental health. That's essentially the goal. So yeah, that's it from my side. Anything you want to add, Abby?
Yeah, I just want to add on the point that, when just now you were mentioning how we can actually let the others know that, we can practice like breathing exercises together. Like this
Mm,
together really makes a huge difference.
yeah.
Like to show the other person that, you will be there for them, and whatever that we want to do, we can do it together, and we can try to improve and practice at the same time. Like it doesn't have to go one way where it sounds like you are trying to give like an instruction or like to give an order. So even the person that's listening it will feel very pressured, like thinking that, do I have to accept an order?
Yeah.
It sounds as though like I'm at fault for being whatever that I'm being. So,
Yeah, definitely. So it's about doing it together, that togetherness, instead of like, instructing and them not knowing what's the point in doing that, right? But instead of like encouraging that, doing it together, that's how you show support actually. So yeah, that's definitely an excellent point. So I think that's it from our side. If I don't think there are any further questions as well. So I really hope all of you, and first of all, thank you for everyone for being here today with us. And again, as always, we are looking forward to seeing you guys again. And not to worry, those who join in late and whatever not, we always have this live session recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel, so you can expect it in a few days. You can always go back to our YouTube channel and rewatch this entire live session. So I hope this is helpful. And of course, ideas are always welcome. If you have a certain topic that you would like to address, feel free to let us know. You can always comment. You can always send us messages to provide your suggestions. So yeah, with that, I thank you guys. Have a good week. Yeah, that's it from my side.
yeah, that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.